Take your marks.
You're listening to the Pullbuoy World Championships podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Pullbuoy podcast as we get ready for a bumper summer of international swimming competition. First up, it's the World Championships and the gang is back together as we look forward to events in Budapest starting next week. Bob is back here. He's been in Bath this week speaking to some of the team. They in a good mood down there, Bob?
All in a very good mood. I felt a very upbeat nature of Dave McNulty's squad that I talked to earlier in the week, and everybody is revved up and ready to go. And of course, a lot of people have got, as one swimmer notably called it, a big target on their backs.
Well, we'll hear a little bit of those chats through this podcast and more in the next episode, as we'll see. Katie's back here as well. Katie, great to have you back. Are you excited for a summer of international swimming?
Yeah, looking forward to it. I think we had a bit of a drought a couple of years ago, so good to be cramming lots of meets in. But I'm probably quite glad not to be one of the swimmers because it's quite a hectic summer.
Yeah, it certainly is a hectic summer. Now, on that topic, 3 meets coming up in quick succession, as we alluded to. We've got Worlds starting imminently, about a month's gap to the Commonwealth Games, and then a week's gap from that to the Europeans. Katie, you say you're glad you're not one of the swimmers who's having to make their mind up. Think it's a case of focusing on one at a time, or would you pick a preference out of the 3 that you're going to, focus on?
I think it's really difficult, and I think a lot of the swimmers have been quite cagey about where their focus is. I don't know if that's because it's sort of just so difficult to plan, or if there's a steer from British Swimming about where that should be. I think things are complicated a little bit more by the fact that Commonwealth Games is at home, and there's always a temptation to prioritise that and, to make sure that you're putting on a great show for the crowd at home. But World Championships, it's such a big deal. Commonwealth Games only every 4 years. It's pretty difficult to make that call. I don't know. I would say that most of them would probably value a World's medal over a Commonwealth medal. But I just don't know how they're going to prioritise and how you manage multiple tapers. It's a really tough ask.
Difficulty is, I think, for some of our swimmers is that, yes, our high-profile swimmers will have their eyes definitely on the World Championships, getting medals there. But a lot of those swimmers that we're talking about will have realistic options and realistic possibilities of getting a medal at the Commonwealth Games. So if they go, well, yeah, I want to compete at the World Championships, but I'm not going to get a medal there, whereas realistically I can get a medal in Birmingham and potentially in Rome as well, where do they then put their focus?
And I think another thing which is potentially a bit difficult is that what you've ended up with, because of this unusual situation where you've got a Worlds and a Commonwealth in a single year, is a sort of slightly odd, certainly on the England side, kind of 2-tier squad where you've got a lot of people coming together for the Worlds and then some extra people joining for the Commonwealths, which I think it will be quite hard to build that feeling of team unity with multiple events and sort of different people in each and then splitting off into the home nations. I'm sure they'll manage it because they always do. And I think there's an excellent feeling when they break into the home nations team and you've got that extra sort of pride for your home nation. But it's just a very odd setup and a weird year, and it will be pretty difficult for everyone to manage, I'm sure.
Well, I think as Adam Barrett was telling us on the last episode, that Team England's communication has been pretty good. So I think hopefully they'll have that in train. But the swimmers you spoke to, Bob, you put this point to them. A number of them I know, their kind of feeling on how they're approaching this summer.
Well, we'll never have anybody, and we'll hear from Dave McNulty talking about this, nobody's ever really had to do this. How do you fit a taper in? How many tapers do you fit in? What kind of taper do you do? How long are you out of the pool for? How much gym work do you do? That very short space of time between the Commonwealth Games and the Europeans, I think, is probably the most testing of the lot, because you don't have it. You've really got to swim through both of those two events, haven't you? You haven't got time to readjust, so you have to treat it like it's an extended meet, really, haven't you? Go straight from the Commonwealth to the Europeans. It's got to be an extended meet from their point of view.
Definitely. Well, as you've trailed it there, let's have a little listen to Dave McNulty and how he is approaching a very unusual summer.
I've been doing this a long time and I've never known it like this. I've got 11 weeks left of this cycle and I've got a World Championships, I've got a Commonwealth Games and a European Championships. And the swimmers are tapering for the Worlds because that's our main aim. We'll come back, we've got 4 weeks where we're going to double taper. We're going to do 2 weeks up and 2 weeks back down for the Commonwealth Games. And then we're just going to bounce on to the Europeans because that's about a week later. So the majority of this season that's left will either be tapering, resting and competing. And I think there's 2 weeks of it where we'll step up. But all the work's done, it's banked. And I've told to the swimmers, don't think of it as a season from the trials to now. Think of it as the season was started on the 4th of January. Because that was 14 weeks to the trials. I give them 3 days off after that. And then we just literally keep going until these Worlds. So I think if you see it as an 8-week preparation, it'll mash with your head a little bit. Mm-hmm. If you see it as a 28-week preparation from January, you'll be all right. But I've never known anything like it. But at the end of the day, I keep saying to myself, for them 18 months to 2 years where we couldn't swim anywhere, it's all here now, and I can't wait to get going.
That's Dave McNulty. He's preparing his squad for a very unusual summer of swimming, a lot of racing to do. You can hear more from him on our next episode, and we'll hear him in those interviews from Bob in full. Let's move on and actually talk about the meet in a bit more detail, although we have to start with the one-footed elephant in the room, as it were, and the fact that Britain will be without Adam Peaty, Bob. He's been such a big part of the resurgence of British swimming over the last few years. A blow or a chance for others to step into the limelight, do you think?
Well, it's going to have a massive impact. It's going to have a massive impact, hasn't it? I mean, take aside the 50 and the 100s from the Worlds that he hopefully will go on to win. It's going to be the mixed medley relay that's affected by that. It's going to be the medley relay that's affected by that. So, there are two events in there that we probably would go in as, if not favourites, very close to being favourites, like we were for the Olympics, which were the best swimmer in the world, and James Wilby is a great swimmer. James Wilby will be the first swimmer. He's no Adam Peaty. And we lose so much time between those two that sadly, even if James is right on his best form, that is our banker, that's our trump card that's gone in that respect.
I also think, and I've probably harped on about this a bit too much before, but I think we get a huge boost from Adam's 100 generally being on day one and the high that gives the team. Hopefully we've got other people that can step into that, and I'm sure we'll come on to this in a minute, some other promising events on day one that can get that momentum going. But I do think it can be quite tough if you don't have a really strong performance early on for the rest of the team to have that feeling of, we're all swimming well, it's going great, I can take advantage of chances too, that sort of thing. So it's a shame, and he's been such a leader for us for so long, and we've been so lucky to have him. But also, I'm pretty amazed that he's got this far through his career without an injury. So I think he's done brilliantly. And I'm sure he'll be back for Commonwealths pretty strong.
I was going to say, I think we maybe have gone beyond that now. I think that most of our swimmers are so motivated and go to an event like this really revved up and ready to go. Actually, I don't think they need the blue touch paper lit by Adam Peaty these days. I think they're so motivated by what they do, and their standards are so high now that perhaps they don't need that anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I've sort of felt on day one of the Olympics that it was a bit flat, because it was one of those things where the men's 400 IM was generally not that fast, and it was sort of like, what are morning finals doing, and everyone finding their own way, and of course there were factors in there that aren't going to be present in Budapest, and then we had that first really, really strong swim, and it was like, okay, here we go. But yeah, I think you're right that the team it's not like we're back in 2013 where you're kind of desperately relying on someone to do something. We've got plenty of people who can perform and do perform, and I'm sure they won't have a problem doing that without Adam.
I also think there's another dynamic that I talk to the swimmers about, is that they're in a pool they feel familiar with. Many have been there several times. Many of them were on ISL teams that swam there. So it's not going to be going away to a pool they don't know. It's a very fast pool. So I think they're going to step back into quite a comfort zone when they go back into that pool.
And I think that's a very valid point. I mean, we had a very successful World Championships there in 2017. And yeah, it's a familiar environment, which is going to help people feel comfortable, isn't it, as you say. A quick adjunct to your comments about relays, Bob. Obviously, we've also be without Kathleen Dawson from that mixed medley relay. She's suffering with a back injury and is going to skip Worlds and Commonwealths this year. So we hope she recovers quickly. It certainly, Katie, leaves an interesting subplot, if you like, for that mixed medley relay. We obviously know Adam will be out. We know Kathleen will be out. So there's a bit of a question mark about what the tactics will be. I mean, we've talked about it, I know, and we think probably is. Do you think a straight swap and keeping James Guy and Anna Hopkin on the end, and then subbing in James Wilby and possibly one of the debutantes in Medi Harris for the backstroke?
I think so. I mean, I think it will depend on how, for example, someone like Medi is coping with such a huge first meet. They've got no reason to think that she can't perform, and she's looked really, really great this year. She's having such a breakout year. I think that back end of that medley relay is so well established, and Anna's such a racer. James is so brilliant when it comes to any relay. I can't see that we would change that up, but I suppose it just depends. It's one of those events where there is the opportunity to think quite creatively, but I can't see that we've got a logical male backstroker or female breaststroker that fits in. So I think you're probably right. It's a lot to ask of people to step into that event where we've historically been so successful, but I think the expectations just will be different this year. It doesn't mean we can't achieve anything and we won't be good in it, because we know we've still got that really strong back end. It's just going to be different.
Well, a great opportunity for Medi there to make her mark on the international stage. Moving on and bringing it back to what you were talking about lighting the blue touch paper, Bob. One of the people going on day one, who whether we need him to or not, we hope will do just that, is Duncan Scott, who's slated to swim the 400 IM on the first day after his British record at the trials, ranked number 2 in the world as we sit here now. Ordinarily, we'd be thinking, he's got to be a great chance for a medal here, and maybe even take his British record down even further. He's just had COVID, terrible timing, but Bob, he's someone who's very resilient. He can bounce back, can't he?
When have you ever seen Duncan Scott not perform? He is as reliable as Adam Peaty is in that respect. He'll go in there. He never lets us down. And whilst that is definitely a setback, it might be just far enough away from the Commonwealth, from the World Championships, for him to get that out of the system and get back in. I'm sure that he'll be, as soon as he can, getting back in there, trying to prepare, trying to train, and trying to get himself in the best shape possible for that. You're right. In an ideal situation, if you hadn't had that, we certainly would have him down for a medal. The way he swam earlier on this year, every expectation, as there always is, expectation on his shoulders now, because every time he goes into any event, he doesn't do events he doesn't think he can perform well in. So he's doing the 400 IM for a very good reason. He'll be in the mix. If he's feeling anywhere near 100% or close to 100%, he'll definitely be in that shake-up.
And Katie, is this the chance for Duncan to win an individual gold medal, do you think? I mean, illness notwithstanding, he's got a great shout once again in the 200 free and the 200 IM. I
mean, if we're getting Duncan who's in good shape, he's got so many chances. I mean, he's got to be one of the best swimmers in the world right now, and any one of those 3 events has to be a gold medal chance for him. Obviously there's nothing's set in stone. He's got challenges both from his own teammates and from elsewhere. I just think COVID is one of those things that affects people so differently, and I think Duncan is one of the factors that would massively change. If he's in shape, then I'd put our medal count pretty high. If he's not, then I think that does dramatically probably impact it, just because he's got his fingers in so many pies. He's so good at so many events, and he could potentially win all 3 of those events if he's ready to perform. Clearly not his fault if he's not.
Well, if he wants to win all three, he'll have to get past one of his teammates. Bob, I think you were alluding to him when you were talking about targets on backs in the shape of Tom Dean, Olympic champion, obviously in the 200 free, who's now taking up the 200 IM as well. He's got a little way to go to catch up with Duncan, but he's another person who'll be wanting to do well and probably prove that 2021 wasn't a flash in the pan.
And also, I was impressed with the way that he approached the Mare Nostrum recently, because it had been quite easy to kind of swim through it, just get himself in terms of preparation, try and get towards where he wants to be for the World Champs. But he didn't. He actually went in and gave it a really good crack, and I think he only lost one of the 4 events he did out there. At the Mare Nostrum, he performed well. Obviously not the times he was doing last year. We didn't want to be doing those at this stage of the season. But I thought that you looked at the people who are coming back from their 2021 swims in 2022. They're all slightly off the pace, but actually I didn't think he was. And I think he did exactly what he had to do and what he wanted to do in the events he took part in.
Well, he'll be a threat, certainly. And those two, Duncan and Tom, will be together in a few relays as well. We'll come on to the 4x2 in a minute, but Bob, the 4x1 is looking pretty tasty
Very
as well.
exciting.
We've got Lewis Burris, who's come in as the newest weapon, if you like, in that quartet. But Tom himself was swimming very fast. We know Duncan's fast. That Jacob Whittle is improving all the time. That quartet could really challenge, especially as Russia won't be in Budapest.
Yes, exactly. I'm really impressed. I mean, we put a lot of focus, quite rightly, because they are the Olympic champions on the 4x2. But our 4x1s, and just not to think about, not too long ago, we couldn't get a quartet of any real standard. We had a couple of decent swimmers, but that was about it for the 4x1. Now we have 4 excellent swimmers who are all doing terrific times, and they'll be there or thereabouts. And you say young Jacob is coming through in leaps and bounds every time he goes in the pool. He seems to do a PB these days. So yeah, I'm very excited about our 4x1s. They're going to be always probably slightly in the shadow of the 4x2, but they're coming alongside pretty quickly now.
And the 4x2, Casey, must go as favourites after last year. The US were pretty tasty in their trials, but if everyone's fit, we've talked about Duncan, but if everyone's healthy enough, it feels like it's them who are the people to shoot at.
Yeah, I think I was probably quite surprised when I saw all the times added up across, I guess, the US, Australia, and Great Britain, to see that we weren't on top just because we've been so dominant recently. But I think our trials were a bit odd. There's a lot of pre-selection. We don't really have a sense of where people are tapered this year, which is quite an unusual position to be in, and I think is sort of fairly unique to us. Maybe a little bit of that in Australia, but I don't think that was so much in the men's 200 free. So I would hope that we should come out on top on that, just because of the depth that we've got. All of those guys are so good. They're so used to swimming in that relay. They always pull it out. I think it's something that's so special. It's an event that is so special to them, and I've never I can't think back to a disappointing performance in that. They're just such racers. They really, really want it. So I think you're right. I think we must be the favourites.
Well, one thing they didn't get in Tokyo last year was the world record. They missed by a few hundredths of a second only, and chasing that was a prospect that Bob put to Tom Dean and to Matt Richards when he met them in Bath. Let's have a little listen.
We were so close to that world record, and my swim on the 200 free wasn't as quick as it could have been. I think the fatigue of the events kind of got the better of me slightly, so I know if I swim the time I'm capable of, then that world record is well within our grasp.
All of us have little things we can improve on. I know for a fact I've got things to improve on, and I think we're talking 2/100ths of a second. It doesn't take much for us to get that. That's 0.005 of a second each, which is a ridiculously small number, and we can definitely find that. And it'd be fantastic if we could get that this summer in Budapest.
That's Tom and Matt talking about the world record in the 4x200 freestyle relay. We've said couched everything in terms of Duncan's health already, but Bob, Katie, do you think they can get it?
Go on, Bob.
Yeah, I do. Absolutely do. But and I'll tell you why, because of the chat I had, and you'll hear it in the longer version with Tom, is he was actually disappointed with his swim in Tokyo. He said, I actually, the quartet, I didn't go as fast as I think I should, or indeed I could. So he knows there's quite a bit left in the tank for him. Hopefully Matt Richards can improve on what he did. As I say, there's that question mark over Duncan, but if he's anywhere near on full fitness, he'll do the job, and Jimmy will too. So yeah, I'm absolutely convinced. I mean, I did predict we'd swim sub-8, didn't I, for Tokyo? So I got that bit right. I didn't quite get the world record, but I think it'll go, and I think it'll go substantially too.
I think as well, which we haven't touched on that much. I feel like Tom Dean is a much he's in a much better place than he was this time last year after all of the struggles he had with COVID. He's, Bob's mentioned how incredibly he swam recently in the Mare Nostrum, and last year he ended up being Olympic champion. So that's a pretty great way to be going into a World Championships. I think, both for his individual events and for the relay, having that confidence behind them's got to be a massive boost.
For sure. Well, we will all watch that event very keenly. We've mentioned Lewis already. Lewis Burris is one of the newcomers in the context of that relay, but he's heading to Budapest ranked 3 in the world in the 100 free after the trials season, when you take out the Russian who's up there as well. So he has a shot there, maybe, if he can reproduce his form. The other new face on the team, Freya Colbert, and likely to get some freestyle swims, maybe the 400 IM, but maybe, just maybe, Katie, her coming in with Mehdi, with Abby and Freya Anderson on the team, we may even see a women's 4x2.
Yeah, I mean, that would be good to see. It's not something that we've put a lot of emphasis on. Who would you have as your 4? I
think there would be Freya Anderson, Abby Woods, Freya Colbert, and Mehdi Harris, which would be 3 157s and a 159 from trials.
I had firmly put Mehdi in a backstroke corner, so she's even more versatile than I thought. I mean, it would be great because I felt like it's a bit of a shame. Clearly, the women's relays are not in the same place as the men's at the moment, but it is a bit of a shame that we've often not raced them at all, and I think so the programs of, I mean, Abby's got a pretty busy program, but it can fit. It's just, I suppose, whether or not it's felt like it's worth it, and perhaps it is more worth it. Again, there are some chances here with the Russians out for us to move our way up the world rankings a bit. It would be good to see, and I think these relays are not just going to become a priority all by themselves. We have to swim them, so if we can start doing that a bit more at major events, I think it would be good. And I also think it gives up and coming swimmers a bit more of hope to hang in there if you've got a chance of being selected on a relay, rather than just sort of always knowing that relay never gets picked anyway. So is there a lot of chance in hanging on? I was a relay swimmer. I'm very glad that they took me to some events, and I wouldn't have got there if they hadn't been taking those relays. So it's a real boost.
Only worry that I have, Steve, about the 4x2 is that there's no spares there, so we'd have to pretty much swim our quartet for the final in the heats as well.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment.
Yeah.
And I suspect that maybe that will swing the decision making when it comes to it. But we'll watch with interest to see if that quartet takes to the water. In terms of other people we're looking forward to watching, I mean, it's a lot of the usual suspects from last year, as we might imagine. Someone you spoke to earlier in the week, Bob, was James Guy, who seemed to imply he was going to swim the 200 fly.
Yes, he is, which surprised me because I kind of expected him to say that 200 fly was something that he'd now canned and consigned to history, but no, apparently not. So we can see the 200 fly. Whether he'll just do it for heats, I don't know, and then withdraw. Maybe he just wants to test himself at that. But I can't see it. I mean, we all know what happened in Tokyo last year, where his main event, the 100 fly, he didn't even get to swim it properly, which I think, and you'll hear in the interview that we'll put out later in the week. I said to him, are you worried you're always going to be now considered a relay swimmer rather than an individual swimmer? Because, most of your medals now come from relays rather than individual. I think he kind of balked to that a little bit. But he obviously made the point, and quite rightly so, that he didn't get a chance to do his main event in Tokyo because he fell on his sword for the relay.
Yeah, well, it will be interesting to see how he travels in that 200 fly. I thought it was something he might do at Commonwealths and maybe not at Worlds, but great to see him growing his repertoire. Someone else I wanted to raise, Ben Proud. He wasn't happy, Katie, with how things went for him in Tokyo. I think he felt he could have done better, but he was so fast in the short course season. World title in the short course 53, and he started 2022 pretty well. So hopefully we can see something for him in the big pool again.
Yeah, and I sort of feel like he's hung in there, and he's had a pretty torrid couple of years in terms of having to move training group because of COVID, and it's probably been quite difficult for him to feel like he's settled and ready to perform, even though he's incredibly professional and always just gets on with things. It's such a difficult event, isn't it, the 53, because it's just such tiny margins as to who's on the podium and who isn't, but he's absolutely got to be one of the people who's in that conversation. The problem is the top 8 are probably within 0.3, 0.4 of each other, so it's just there's no room for anything to even go slightly wrong, and he's such a perfectionist. But I mean, I would hope to see him there. I think in a way it must be quite tough having that such a laser focus on this one event that is so competitive. Obviously they all are, but as we've spoken about the 53, there's just no room for error whatsoever. So yeah, I think I'm hoping he can get back on the podium.
Well, he'll have that chance. He I think I want to say he won the world title in 50 fly in Budapest, but I may have I'm pretty sure it's Budapest. He won the 50 fly, didn't he, 2017? So maybe he will have a go in that one as well. You also spoke to Freya in the week, Freya Anderson, Bob, who's talking about branching out into the 400, maybe moving away from the 100. So it'll be interesting to see what she does there.
Well, to me, and actually, I'd like to get Casey's view on this, because I think she's built for 400. She's the kind of swimmer who has all those skills, and I think that she's got the endurance, and I think that she has a great back end, and I just think that, to me, 2 and 4 sits more comfortably with me looking at the way she swims.
It's quite unusual to come to the 400 later on in the way that she is. I think so far she's been much better short course on the 400 than long course, which still suggests to me that 200's her kind of sweet spot. So far, and she is still really new to the 400, and so far I haven't seen anything that absolutely convinces me that she's got a great.
She's not doing it often enough, though, has she, really, to prove that? I mean, she's not happy with her time.
Exactly.
Obviously, she says she's not world class yet, but it sounds like something she's really working on and something she wants to crack.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'll be interested to see how she gets on with it. At the moment, I still feel like she's 100, 200 person because her 100's still so competitive. But I'm very happy for her to prove me wrong. I mean, ideally, obviously, I'd love her to be great at all 3, but that's pretty unusual.
Well, we'll see how she goes in her various events in Budapest in due course. It's difficult. I think I was thinking about who else we have who will be up there from a British perspective, who we'd like to see do well in Budapest, and I've actually found it quite difficult to kind of put any science, if you like, behind how I think they're going to do, because if you think of the 2 in particular I was thinking of were Abby Wood and Molly Renshaw, who we haven't pre-selected, and we haven't necessarily seen them at their best this year. Or Molly didn't even swim trials. She's been solid at Mare Nostrum, but not right up at her best. So a bit of unknown, Katie, possibly for those 2.
Yeah, I think Abby's been really consistent in everything that, I've seen her go multiple 210s on 200 IM, which is good, but it's not the really exciting form that we saw, kind of last year leading into the Olympics. So really difficult to know where that puts her. And Molly feels like a complete unknown. Exactly as you said, we haven't seen her at all rested, I don't think. A bit of a shame not to see her at trials, but obviously completely fine. She's pre-selected. So yeah, I would agree. They feel quite unknown, whereas last year we were, almost hanging medals around their necks in terms of how exciting their performances had been.
We're not talking British swimming here, but we're talking about obviously the person who's done so much in the 200 and 400 IM. Could this be the last swim for Katinka Horseshoe at international level?
She's recently said that she doesn't plan to swim in Paris because she plans to have a family. But I don't know. I mean, it would be a pretty good way to go out, I think, in a home World Championships. But she's actually, I've been quite surprised at how strong some of her swims have been this year. I was surprised to see her go 4:35 400 IM and Men Ostrom. I thought those days were sort of behind her, to be honest. So I think she's someone that I'm guilty of underestimating, and I don't think she's done yet. But I sort of feel like, she's almost going to be the Serena Williams who probably does a World Championships when she's 8 months pregnant, and you see her on the podium. I don't think you can count her out until she tells you that she's out.
Well, maybe she'll get the send-off like Laszlo did in Budapest last year at Europeans. But yeah, don't count her out for sure. While we're on the subject of international swimmers that we're looking forward to see, the name that is exciting me for these World Championships, Katie, I think you'll probably agree, Summer Mcintosh.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of excited, and I'm sort of reining myself in because she is 15 and she doesn't have her coach anymore, and she's been coached by Ben Titley, who we know has had some incredible results, but he's now moved on to Spain, so we don't know what kind of impact that's going to have had on her. She, her ceiling seems ridiculously high. I don't know if I'm getting carried away, but 4:29 400 IM, 2:05 200 fly, and 4:01 400 free at 15 is ridiculous. They're not necessarily the best times ever in the world, but they're right up there, and she's shown herself from the Olympics not to be fazed by major competitions. So I think she's someone that I'm excited about, but I sort of feel slightly cautious about going completely over the top about.
Yeah. And it's a shame we're not going to see Ledecky against Titmus this year either.
Yeah, it is a shame. I actually kind of have some sympathy for wanting a break from this rivalry that is sort of a lot more media built, I think, than between the two of them. I think particularly in Australia, because I think the media in Australia are pretty brutal, to be honest, and I think they build it up far more than Ledecky or Titmus themselves would. But I mean, I'd love to see that 400 free. I think and I'd love to see the 200 free. Not that Ledecky's doing it this year, but I think those would be brilliant races between them, because they're both just such incredibly determined racers. Neither of them want to lose, and that's, I think, what makes the contest between them so good.
Well, I'm sure we will see lots of exciting races, probably some new names, post-Olympic year, slightly unusual worlds. So we'll look forward to seeing those people rise up. Quick shout out for the open water, Bob. Britain with the two guys going in the open water in Toby Robinson and Hector Pardo.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing those. I'll be doing the commentary on those in Budapest. So both in pretty good form, not in medal form yet, but both of them with the possibility of getting in there. Obviously, open water can be a little bit of a crapshoot sometimes. And let's hope this time that obviously there aren't too many broken noses or cuts or bruises and that kind of stuff. But of course, open water can be a little bit fierce, and I'm sure Hector will be trying to avoid any kind of scraps of that nature this time. Keeping away from the elbows, definitely on the way around. All right, I'm going to put you both on the spot, and maybe I'll offer my thoughts first. But thoughts on a likely GB medal haul from Budapest? Do you want me to go first and give you a benchmark?
Yes, please do. Yes, please.
Yes.
I think I'm in a place where anything around 5 would be a really good performance, given the various travails that the team has had and the unusual preparation. So that's my opening gambit.
I was going to go with 4, but with absolutely no thought or science behind it. I couldn't tell you where they're coming from. But I know that I'm generally the voice of doom on these sort of things. So I'm going to hand over to Bob for something that will be much more optimistic.
Yes, indeed, I am. I'm going to go 7.
Okay.
I'm going to go 7. I think we've got there's plenty of opportunities in there. Not all are going to come home like they invariably don't, but I think there's enough in there. If Duncan's fully fit, and that's going to be the key to the medal haul. Obviously, we're going to lose out on the Adam Peaty effect, but I think there's a chance of getting up to potentially 7. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we will see which of us is the nearest in due course. Just before we draw matters to a close, this is our 99th podcast episode.
You're baking a cake for that.
So you get an ice cream, Bob, with a flake in it.
Lovely.
But obviously, number 100, as we've said a number of times through this podcast, will be a chance to hear the conversations that Bob had with some of the British team down in Bath earlier this week. I've got a little quiz for you both. Across the course, and it doesn't include episode 100, it's only across the course of 99 episodes, how many different guests do you think we've had on this podcast?
Oh, different guests.
Guests, yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm including if we've had an interview with someone from a mixed zone or whatever in that. So in terms of voices that have appeared apart from us.
I need to clarify the terms of this, Steve. Is this Pullbuoy podcast only, or does it involve our offshoots?
I've included London Raw in all this.
Ooh, that ups it a lot.
Oh, it does.
And I'm going to go for 30. Oh, does this include your your Commonwealth ones? You've done some look backs over 20 years and stuff, haven't you?
Yeah. No, that's all included. Yeah, that's all included.
I'm going to go for 34.
Oh, interesting. Higher or lower, Mr. Ballard?
I'm going to go higher. I'm going to go 40.
See, I went through and counted them up, and 64.
Whoa.
64 different guests, 113 appearances by 64 different guests. And now, would you like to have a guess at who the number one, our most regular contributor is?
Is it Ross Davenport?
It is indeed Ross Davenport.
Yeah.
6 times he's been on. There we are. Followed closely by Hannah Miley, Lizzie Simmons, and then a 4-way tie between James Guy, Siobhan Marie O'Connor, which was a surprise to me, James Guy, and Adam Peaty. So there we are.
Can we just do a quick shout out to Hannah Miley MBE?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely. Who I'm looking forward to working with for the host broadcaster on the Commonwealth Games.
Congratulations, Hannah. Very well deserved.
Indeed, very well deserved. Right, well, that's a good time to draw things to a close. Bob, Katie, thanks very much for your thoughts, and I'm looking forward to watching the swimming and then chewing the fat about it with you afterwards. There will be, as we've said a number of times, another podcast along shortly with some more interviews in it, so look out for that. If you want to get in contact about anything from this podcast, you can find me on Twitter at Pullbuoy or at Pullbuoy UK on Facebook and Instagram, or go to pullbuoy.co.uk/contact. We're excited for the swimming, looking forward to some great racing, but until that's all done and dusted, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Pullbuoy podcast. For more episodes, visit www.pullbuoy.co.uk/podcast.